All right, so I'm back with more TV shows from the 80s and 90s that you might have forgot about. Now, if you didn't see the first video that I did a while back, I'll put a link to that at the end of this video. So when you're done with this video, you can go back and watch the first one. Now, again, if you didn't watch the first video that I did, I'll kind of tell you what we're doing today. We're talking about TV shows from the 80s and 90s that you might have forgot about. Some of these are going to be a little bit more memorable than others, but I guarantee you there's going to be at least a couple of shows in here that you might have at least temporarily forgot about, and maybe one or two shows that you've never heard of at all. Now, I've been thinking a lot lately about this time in my life. It was around like 89 or 90, where my mom and I had this lineup of TV shows that we would watch together in the evening while we were waiting for my dad to come home from work. And it started on Lifetime. If you're not familiar with that channel, that was a basic cable channel that was geared towards women. And so it would start with my mom watching the Lifetime afternoon movie while I was outside playing. And then once that was over, I would come inside and we would watch TV together. And a couple of the shows were on Lifetime. And then after that, we would switch over to the Disney Channel. And so that's what I want to talk about right now. The first show that comes to mind that was part of that lineup was a TV show called ER.
I've got a real emergency here, and I really don't know what to do.
Yeah, so probably not the ER that you were thinking of. This is actually a sitcom that was on for just one season from 1984 to 1985 on CBS. This is not the one with George Clooney.
To meet Ace, our new EMT, Dr. Scheinfeld.
Hello, Ace.
Well, actually, never mind. This is the one with George Clooney. He was actually on both versions of ER.
Pressure?
Yeah, but I can handle it.
How many of you had any idea that George Clooney was on two different TV shows called ER?
Cool. Are you in a group?
The body fluids.
Now, the 80s version of ER, like I said, was a sitcom, although it did deal with serious situations as well. Since it was an emergency room, of course, they have people coming in with all types of different illnesses, serious situations. So they do deal with those serious topics, and it gets a little heavy from time to time, but for the most part, it is a comedy. It stars Elliot Gould as Dr. Scheinfeld. It focuses on him and the head doctor, also two nurses, a receptionist, and a cop who hangs around because he's dating the receptionist. Now, they ran repeats of ER on Lifetime from 88 until 92, and as far as I know, it has not been shown anywhere since then. And you cannot find this show anywhere. You can barely even find information about this show because if you try looking it up, you're mostly just going to get stuff about the more popular version of the show that everybody knows. I just recently found it on YouTube. It's pretty bad quality, but I mean, it's okay. It's watchable. But it's YouTube uploaded from old VHS tapes. But that's all you're going to get. You're not going to find it anywhere else. This is one that I really wish that they would release on DVD because I enjoyed watching it as a kid, but now going back and watching it as an adult, I find that I enjoy it even more because, I get a lot of the stuff that I didn't get back then. It really is a good show. So yeah, how many of you knew about the first version of ER? Now, once ER was over, it was game show time.
Welcome to the first supermarket in the world that gives you money. So get ready, because you never know what's going to happen on Supermarket Sweep.
I'm sure most of you remember the game show Supermarket Sweep. This has been on for many years. They've done, different versions of it throughout the decades. But this is the version that I most remember because this is the version that I watched with my mom on Lifetime in the late 80s. I really enjoyed watching this show. I actually think it's a little weird how much a 9 or 10-year-old enjoyed watching a TV show about people shopping. But yeah, I really enjoyed watching this. I've tried watching some of the other versions of this show, and I just can't get into it. I think because, this is the version that I'm used to. I have gone back and watched this version as an adult, and I enjoy it just as much. They were showing this, I don't know if they still are, but they were showing this for a while on, I think it was the Game Show Network, one of those game show channels. But yeah, it's one that you can still find. You can still find this version of it. I still love it. I think it's great. Now, one thing that I realized going back and watching this show as an adult, when I was a kid, I actually thought that was a real supermarket that they were in. I thought they went and, rented out a real supermarket and filmed a game show in there once a week. But I also didn't think about the fact that maybe the supermarket wouldn't want them throwing the food around and, knocking everything over. Whatever. You don't think about these things when you're kids. But yeah, obviously as an adult, I realize not a real supermarket. Next, a little romantic comedy. And again, I think it's a little strange how much a 10-year-old enjoyed this show. I'm talking about Moonlighting.
Some walk by night, some fly by day.
Now, not only was Moonlighting a great show, but it had an amazing theme song. Now, Moonlighting was originally on ABC from 1985 to 1989 for 5 seasons, but they did show repeats on Lifetime, which is where I watched it with my mom. Now, if you're not familiar with Moonlighting, but you probably are because this is one of the more popular ones on today's list, but just in case, it stars Bruce Willis as David Addison and Sybil Shepherd as Maddie Hayes. It also features Curtis Armstrong.
Call me Booger.
Okay, Booger. He comes in a little bit later as a temp and then eventually a junior detective, and he's the love interest of their quirky receptionist, who's also a big part of the show. And in case you've never seen it, it's about them running a private detective agency. Originally, it's just Bruce Willis's agency, and then he brings in Sybil Shepherd. She doesn't want to have anything to do with it, but he kind of ropes her into it. And then throughout the rest of the series, it's one of those things where, is there going to be a romance between the two of them? Do they hate each other? Do they love each other? This one is a little bit easier to find. I actually have the entire series on DVD, and I still think it's a great show to this day. Now, after that, it was time to switch over to the Disney Channel for another game show. I'm talking about Teen Win, Lose, or Draw.
You know why all these kids are in Mark Price's driveway? They're about to play America's favorite quick draw game. So grab your mother's lawn chair and drag it on over. It's time for Teen Win, Lose, or Draw!
So I don't know what it is about Teen Win, Lose, or Draw, but when I think about this show, it makes me so happy. It's one of those shows that just really gives me that late 80s vibe, like a summertime, Southern California kind of vibe. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but going back and watching this show just really makes me so happy. Now, Teen Win, Lose, or Draw was on the Disney Channel from 1989 until 1991, and it was hosted by Mark Price, Skippy from Family Ties. And the game show supposedly took place in the driveway of Mark Price's house. There was a whole bunch of people gathered in front of his house, sitting in lawn chairs, and I believe they were standing in front of the garage. And beyond that, it was basically win, lose, or draw. There were 2 teams, and each team would have a celebrity guest that was the leader of that team, and they would take turns getting up and drawing pictures for their team, and the other teammates would have to try and guess what the picture was, and then, of course, whoever guessed the most right pictures won the game. It's pretty basic, but this was geared towards teens, so it was a lot more fun. They would, when they would show the prizes, they would do things like they would have Frankenstein's hand come out of a window showing the prize, like silly little stuff like that that just made the show more fun, had, fun theme music. Like I said, it just had a really late 80s kind of Southern California vibe to it. And I love this show. I would absolutely love if they would put this on DVD. I'm sure they never will, just like all of these other shows I'm talking about today, but I would love it. And then it was time for one of my favorites, and I'm sure most of you are gonna remember this one.
Everybody look around, hear the sound, something special's gonna come your way. We've got something that is new, that is true, we've got something just for you today. All around the nation, whoa, with a new sensation. Have you heard? Have you heard? Have you heard? We're Kids Incorporated. K-I-D
So Kids Incorporated was on the Disney Channel. It originally aired from 1984 to 1994. I didn't realize that it ran that long. And then they showed repeats until 1996. Now, if you're not familiar with Kids Incorporated, basically it's about a kids band that performs exclusively in this old music venue called the Palace. And they just spend their days performing cover songs, and then when they're not performing, they're solving problems or talking about problems. This is another one that I wish so badly that this would come out on DVD, but it's never going to happen because, like I just mentioned, the entire show is about them performing cover songs. So, you know, the licensing for this would be a total nightmare. It would just never happen. Mostly they did songs that were popular in the time, so there was a lot of great covers.
He could be the one. I like his style. The masquerades forever. The masquerades forever. Just you open my love. All over.
Now, Kids Incorporated had some band members and dancers that went on to be pretty famous later on, which includes Fergie from the Black Eyed Peas, Martika, who had Toy Soldiers a little bit later in the 80s, Mario Lopez on the drums, Jennifer Love Hewitt, and Shanice, who had the two hit songs Saving Forever for You and I Love Your Smile. Kids Incorporated also had a bunch of great guest stars like Jeff Cohen from The Goonies, Jason Hervey from Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Wonder Years, Brittany Murphy, and Barry Williams from The Brady Bunch. So how many of you watched Kids Incorporated? How many of you miss Kids Incorporated? And how many of you would love to see them release it on DVD? Now, the last show that was part of our early evening lineup was also on the Disney Channel, and it was MMC, or the all-new Mickey Mouse Club.
Who's the leader of the club that's meant for you and me? M-I-C-K-Y-M-O-U-S-E. Hey there, Idaho, there you go, that's Club of Max Mandy. M-I-C-K-Y-M-O-U-S-E. Mickey Mouse.
Now, of course, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Mickey Mouse Club, something that's been around for a really long time, long before the 80s, started in, I believe, the 60s with Annette and Cubby, but this is the all-new Mickey Mouse Club, or MMC as it was called. Now, this was on the Disney Channel from 89 to 94, and what really stands out about MMC is there was a lot of cast members that went on to be big stars. And just a few of the kids that were on the all-new Mickey Mouse Club that went on to be superstars include Ryan Gosling, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake, and JC Chasez from NSYNC. And the show was a mix of skits, kind of like a kid's version of Saturday Night Live, and also music videos featuring the cast members, and also live musical performances also featuring the cast members. And I don't know why I liked this show so much, but I just remember that I did. So that was the last show that was part of our early evening lineup. But since we're talking about kids shows right now, You Can't Do That on Television was a Canadian kids sketch comedy show that originally aired in Canada in 1979 and then aired here in the United States on Nickelodeon from 1981 until 1990. Another one that I didn't realize was on the air for that long. Now, if you had basic cable back in the 80s and you watched Nickelodeon, then you probably know that You Can't Do That on Television is one of the original Nickelodeon shows, and this is where green slime came from. Green slime that became a staple of Nickelodeon. They used to dump this on everybody. It was the big thing on Double Dare. They had green slime shampoo. They would dump it on everybody at the Kids' Choice Awards. Green slime was the symbol of Nickelodeon, and it all started on You Can't Do That on Television. Now, the gag is one cast member would ask another cast member a question, trying to get them to say, I don't know. because if you said, I don't know, you got green slime dumped on your head. Now, why did you get green slime dumped on your head for saying that? Well, now who knows what child actress starred on You Can't Do That on Television? That's right, Alanis Morissette. I told you the show was Canadian.
I love you, Alanis.
Now, besides Alanis Morissette and the green slime, You Can't Do That on Television was a very strange sketch comedy show. Some of the reoccurring sketches included one of the children being placed in front of a firing squad about to be executed, and then they would talk their way out of being executed. Another one was one of the children being locked up in a dungeon, trying to talk their way out of the dungeon, and the adult dungeon master teasing them about how they're never going to get out. Another one was the restaurant that the kids would frequent that was ran by Barth. And although the food was disgusting, for some reason the kids would keep going back to this restaurant. And then probably the most famous reoccurring bit was the locker jokes, which featured their school lockers, and they would pop out and tell each other jokes. Now, although going back and watching this as an adult, it's a lot stranger than I remember, it was still a huge part of kids' TV in the 80s, and you can currently find it on Paramount Plus. All right, we're gonna talk about one more show today, and this is one that a lot of you were upset that I didn't include it in the last list, but I told you to not worry, that of course I would be including this show, and here it is. Sledgehammer. Although a favorite by a lot of people, it actually only ran for 2 seasons on ABC from 1986 until 1988. If you've never seen the show, it is a tough guy cop show, but a satire tough guy cop show, kind of a satire of Dirty Harry, like a very over-the-top version of Dirty Harry. Now, like I said, Sledgehammer was a favorite for a lot of people, and it actually did really well in the ratings. But for some reason, ABC kept moving it to different time slots, and some people weren't able to keep up with that, so it kept slipping in the ratings because of them moving it around to different time slots. And then eventually, in its second season, they moved it to a new time slot up against The Cosby Show. And if you remember, The Cosby Show was a powerhouse in the 1980s. Nobody could beat The Cosby Show. And so, unfortunately, Sledgehammer was not renewed for a 3rd season. Luckily, it did see a DVD release, though. Now, a couple of things that I learned about Sledgehammer while I was researching for this is, number one, originally it had him pointing the gun directly at the viewer and firing his gun, but execs thought that that would cause heart attacks, and they wouldn't allow that. Very strange. Another thing that I found very interesting is the TV show came out right around the same time as The Song by Peter Gabriel, which I love that song. And this was completely by coincidence, but ABC took this coincidence and they used it to their advantage, and they used the song Sledgehammer in radio and TV commercials. And supposedly Peter Gabriel was willing to license the song to them and even rewrite some of the lyrics so they could use it for the theme song. But for whatever reason, the execs didn't want to meet Peter Gabriel's terms, and they turned him down, which I think is pretty crazy. But because of them turning down Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer went on to be Danny Elfman's first TV show theme song. All right, that's going to do it for this video, but don't worry, there are so many more TV shows that I want to talk to you about, so we're definitely going to do another one of these. Let me know in the comments, how many of these shows did you watch? How many had you forgotten about? And how many had you never heard of at all? As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.